Topping today's news, BPL signs a new solar power purchase deal. Prime Minister Davis updates on CARICOM's reaction to the U.S. threat of visa sanctions over the Cuban medical program. The Attorney General responds to the U.S. on corruption in the Bahamas, and the University of the Bahamas names a new president. This is your JCN Evening News. I'm Jarino Saunders. It is a pleasure to have you join us. Bahamas Power and Light signing a new contract with Madeleine Solar Power today. The contract involves a major solar installation on the island of New Providence that will represent 7.4% of power demand at BPL. Prime Minister Philip Davis says this new project is a significant step in the Bahamas government's commitment towards 30% sustainable energy, renewable energy by 2030.
We take a bold step forward. We take a step forward toward energy security, where clean, reliable, and affordable power is no longer a distant dream, but a reality unfolding right before us. This signing represents a promise fulfilled, a declaration made by this administration signaling to the nation and the world that the Bahamas is ready to embrace renewable energy.
He said this step will redefine the reality of energy supply in the Bahamas and will also mean lower carbon emissions, lower costs for BPL, and lower bills for consumers. We'll have more from that report, that press conference, in a later report. While at the R. Bailey High School this morning, Prime Minister Davis was asked if there were any new developments in relation to the U.S. visa threat to Caribbean countries that engage the Cuban medical program. He said that the CARICOM countries have been in discussions.
None of the Caribbean countries will intentionally or knowingly engage in or facilitate forced labor. And so it requires us to examine our arrangement to determine whether it is or not. But in our case, I can speak to specifically, before we engage anyone from Cuba, we send a team of professionals, sometimes numbering up to 12, to interview persons who would like to fill the needs that we have. And that is in the case. We will not intentionally or willingly engage in matters that amount to forced labor.
The Prime Minister reminded that the Bahamas Constitution speaks against such actions like forced labor or slavery after a number of Caribbean leaders spoke boldly last week in defiance of the threat by the U.S. to sanction the visas of government officials. Mr. Davis was asked if he was prepared to take a similar approach, even if it meant giving up the U.S. visa.
We will do our part. We're going to respond. This doesn't require any loud mouth or what will happen at the end of the day. What the Bahamian people will know is that I'm in for their interests. Whatever it takes to protect their interests, I'm willing and prepared to do. And we'll be responding comprehensively to the requests asked of us. And if that does not find favor, well then, so be it.
Asked if Cuban workers in the Bahamas receive their full pay, or does the money go to the Cuban government, as suggested by the United States, Mr. Davis responded like this.
As far as I'm aware, only the medical professionals, a portion of their salary is sent to an agency in Cuba. I don't know the relationship between that agency and the government of Cuba.
Prime Minister Davis said the arrangement with the Cuban medical program is a fair one and that the Bahamas once had a similar agreement with the United States. A recent U.S. State Department report on the Bahamas charges that the Bahamas has to implement more legislation regarding public procurement practices and anti-corruption. Well, the Office of the Attorney General of the Bahamas has responded and says the U.S. government has shown little or no acknowledgement of the Bahamas' progress in this area. In a statement, the Office of the Attorney General points out that the Bahamas is compliant with all 40 recommendations of the Financial Action Task Force and it is a testament to the strength of our regulatory framework and the government's proactive approach in maintaining a well-regulated financial services sector. It adds that the most recent U.S. report continues to rely on language repeated nearly verbatim year after year, and that a review of these reports suggests a lack of substantive engagement with the significant reforms the Bahamas has undertaken. The Attorney General's office said it is important for international financial regulations to be applied fairly and consistently, noting that there remains areas where some jurisdictions, including the United States, have yet to fully align with global best practices. The statement said the Bahamas remains fully committed to upholding the highest international standards in financial regulation, anti-money laundering, and tax transparency, but insists there must be a level playing field. Finally, in this segment, Dr. Robert Blaine has officially been named president of the University of the Bahamas during a ceremony held at the Harry C. Moore Library this morning. According to Chair of UB's Board of Trustees, Allison Maynard Gibson, KC, Dr. Blaine was chosen based on his expertise and accomplishments in the field. Maynard Gibson emphasized that this is a step in the right direction for the institution.
The presidential search process began in June 2024 with the appointment of the Presidential Search Committee, comprised of representatives from UB and the broader community. With the support of executive search firm AGB Search, the committee developed a comprehensive statement of qualifications for the new president, established a timeline, and conducted a global search for the most highly qualified candidates. The committee's hard work and the insights from our stakeholders, faculty, staff, students, administrators, alumni, the business community, civil society, unions, and the public, were integral to the process.
Officials say this appointment comes after an extensive search that began nearly 1 year ago with the appointment of the Presidential Search Committee. They say they are confident about the improvements to come.
Today, we are pleased to announce that the new president of UB, effective the 1st of July 2025, is Dr. Robert Blaine III. Dr. Blaine currently serves as the Senior Executive and Director of the Center for Leadership, Education, Advancement, and Development and the Center for Municipal Practice, National League of Cities, based in Washington, D.C. The Board of Trustees selected Dr. Blaine based on his vision and expertise, paired with his commitment to transformative education, which aligns with the university's mission and strategic priorities. He brings a wealth of experience in implementing sustainable quality enhancement initiatives and leading through complex regulatory landscape.
Dr. Blaine accepted his new position, expressing deep honor to be selected and noting that he is looking forward to working closely with the Board of Trustees and UB stakeholders to serve the students while advancing and supporting the national development of the Bahamas. You're listening to JCN News. We'll take a break here. We'll be right back following these commercials.